What's going on, guys? My name is Derek. Welcome to my channel. Today we're doing an install of some wheel bearings for my BMW S1000RR track bike. Welcome back, guys. So if you watched my last couple of videos, my track day mini series, you know that my recent track day at Palmer Motorsports Park pretty much got rained out for me. I didn't have rain tires. I don't have a second set of wheels to mount them on, and pretty much just gave away a couple of $100 to Tony's track days. And if you're anything like me, you don't like just giving away money. So what I did was I picked up a used second set of wheels and some rain tires, and just got the wheels back from powder coating, and I need to install the wheel bearings. Now, I have to apologize to you guys right now because I initially planned to do a complete wheel bearing tear down, replacement, and so forth, but I really needed to get the wheels over to the powder coat and get them back because my track day is next weekend, and I wanted to make sure that I had the wheels back in time for this track day. So I didn't get to record the removal of the wheel bearings. I'll walk through that process and show you the tools that you need and the process that you'll need to go through to remove your wheel bearings on your S1000RR stock wheels, but I didn't get to record any of that, so I apologize. But we are going to install the wheel bearings now on the freshly powder coated wheels that I just got back 2 days ago. Super excited about these things, so let's go and take a look. So these are my recently powder coated stock S1000RR wheels. I picked these up on eBay. I found a guy that was selling them. They're stock wheels, and while they're straight, or round, I should say, there are no dings in the lip, there's no warpage or anything like that, but they were really, really beat up. I'll show you some pictures of what they looked like right now. But as you can see, they were pretty beat up and pitted, and the powder coating on them was pretty bad. It looks like the previous owner or someone at some time had powder coated them, and it was all pitted and jacked up. So I decided to get them powder coated, and this is called fluorescent yellow or high flow yellow. I think it'll go really well with an all black bike. But yeah, I had to knock out the wheel bearings and dismount all the rotors and things of that nature. But now I got them back, so we need to install valve stems. We need to install the wheel bearings and seals, and we need to get the rain tire. Well, I initially planned to mount rain tires on these, but they look so freaking good that I think I'm going to dismount those Metzler dry tires off the blue wheels and put them on the high flow fluorescent yellow wheels and use those as my dry tire wheels, and then I'll use the blue ones as my rain tire wheels. What do you guys think about that? In fact, I may actually, even though that paint is holding up really, really well from what I did a couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago now when I painted those, the paint is holding up really, really well. It's not flaking or anything, so not to pat myself on the back, but I'm going to pat myself on the back. That was a hell of a job. They're doing really well. But I love this color so much on the new wheels that I think I may do another powder coat on the blue wheels. I don't know, maybe I'll go like an electric blue or a high flow blue or something like that. I don't know, or maybe a two-tone high flow yellow and something like that. I don't know what I'm going to do, but anyway, let's head on over to my desk. I'll show you the tools and the wheel bearing kits, also the seals and stuff like that you're going to need to reinstall the wheel bearings and seals on your stock S1000RR wheels. All right, guys, we're over here at my desk, and before I show you the actual wheel bearing kits that I purchased, I figured I'd show you the hardware and items that I took off in the old wheel bearings. So obviously we have the rear brake rotor and the sensor ring and hardware. I need to clean these up here, so as part of our reinstallation process, we'll clean those up. We have the front wheel bearing set. There are two wheel bearings for each wheel, plus a third one. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then we have the front wheel spacer, the rear wheel spacer, the rear wheel bearings, and your snap ring. So if you take a close look at these wheel bearings, they are pretty nasty and pretty beat up. There's not a whole lot of play in them, but lots of corrosion. They're pretty beat up. If I had to guess, I'd say these were the original wheel bearings that shipped with the bike new. It doesn't look like these have ever been replaced. The rears are even worse. As you can see, there's not even a cover on the back side. As you can see on the front, there's a rubber cover or hard plastic cover that covers the wheel bearings. In the rears, that's not there. It's gone, and there's all types of grime and crap in there. And actually, the sleeves, I actually cleaned the sleeves up, so the sleeves look pretty good, but they were just as grimy and nasty. So it's a good idea that we're replacing these anyway. But I'll move these all to the side and show you the wheel bearing. So here's the wheel bearing. This is the wheel bearing kit that I recently purchased. You'll need two kits typically, one for the front wheels, one for the rear. This is the front. As you can see, it's the all balls kit. And if you buy a kit, open this up with one hand here, sorry about that. When you buy a kit, they typically come with the wheel bearings and seals. So each wheel has two wheel bearings and two seals. So you see my nice new wheel bearings and two seals. The rear kit will come with three wheel bearings. So you got two wheel bearings here, decal, your two seals, and a third wheel bearing. And like Derek, you just said, each wheel has two wheel bearings. Why is there a third wheel bearing for the rear? Well, the wheel itself has two wheel bearings, one for each side. However, the hub or your carrier, your sprocket carrier, also has a bearing in it, and that's where this goes. And we're not replacing this because the bearing in my hub carrier is practically new. There's nothing wrong with it. So we're just going to deal with the two seals and our wheel bearings here. So while we're sitting here chatting, I'm going to grab my wheel bearings and I'm going to go and put these in the freezer. We'll talk about why I'm putting them in the freezer in just a second. All right, so let's get this stuff out of the way here. Like I said, I'll hold on to the rear rotor in the sensor ring. I'll clean up these bolts before we reinstall them, but those wheel bearings are pretty much junk. We'll need to hold on to the snap ring and the spacers, but I could take these, throw them in the garbage. So let's move this stuff to the side and let's talk about some of the tools that we are going to need. All right, first you're going to need a set of snap ring pliers. You saw the snap ring over here. So we're going to need a set of snap ring pliers to remove this. I happen to like these snap ring pliers because they can work on snap rings that are for internal snap rings or external snap rings. So that snap ring is internal. So as you see, when I squeeze this together, it puts pressure and it squeezes the two tips together. That way it'll squeeze. That way it'll squeeze the snap ring closed and I can remove it. But it also works on external, so I can move this to the other side, give it a couple of squeezes, and now you'll see when I squeeze the pliers, the two tips open, move away from one another. So for exterior snap rings, these will work on as well. So I really like these, really cool. So snap ring pliers, do you need them? You don't necessarily need them, but they'll make removing that snap ring a whole hell of a lot easier. Otherwise, you'll need a pick or flathead screwdriver, and you'll have to hope that you don't mess up your wheels. Next, you will need some type of seal driver kit. So this is an inexpensive, I can open this with one hand here. This is an inexpensive bearing and seal driver kit with a number of different spacers and the hammer portion, I guess you'd call it. A while ago, someone gave me a hard time on one of my videos, said that I had all these expensive bikes and I had cheap Harbor Freight tools. Yeah, you don't need really expensive tools all the time for certain things. A Phillips head screwdriver is a Phillips head screwdriver. A bearing and seal driver set is a bearing and seal driver set. I don't need to spend $200–300 on a really expensive top quality seal driver set that I'm going to use maybe once a year. This Harbor Freight stuff is just fine. So whatever. So yeah, seal and driver kit. If you don't have one of these, then you can use then you can use some sockets that are similar sized to your wheel bearings. And we'll talk about those a little bit later. You may need a mallet. Again, if you don't have the seal and driver kit, you may need a mallet, particularly if you're using you know, your sockets and so forth to drive the bearings in. You will need a heat gun to heat up the wheel, and you'll need a freezer. So why do we need a freezer to install wheel bearings? If you have a wheel press, if you have a bearing press, a table press, what have you, you might not need them, but if you're the home DIYer, freezer makes things a little bit easier. Why? We pop the bearings in the freezer to contract them. They'll become slightly smaller, and we use the heat gun to heat up the mounting surface of the wheel. Heat expands things, cold shrinks things. So if we slightly shrink the wheel bearings and we slightly expand the wheels, then a lot of times when we go to install the wheel bearings, we don't even need a driver set. Sometimes they will just drop right in. And then as the bearings cool, they'll expand. It's not a whole lot, but it's enough so that they'll go in easier. Either way, by putting the bearings in the freezer, we make installing the bearings in the wheels a little bit easier. That way you don't damage your wheels or anything like that. So if you have a set of carbon fiber wheels or magnesium wheels or light aluminum alloy wheels and you're worried about damaging them, pop your bearings in the freezer. Now, how long do they need to be in there? I don't know, overnight probably. Mine have been in there since I got them a few days ago. It doesn't hurt anything, so just throw them in the freezer for a day, and when you're ready to have them installed, grab your heat gun, heat up the wheels, and pop them in. There you go. So that's why we need a freezer. So these are the things we're going to need to install our wheel bearings. Now, I also have over here a tap and die set. Yes, that I also got from Harbor Freight. So I have a tap and die set. You won't need a tap and die set to install your wheel bearings or your seals. I will be using the tap and die set because my wheels are just back from powder coating. So I want to make sure that I clean up the bolt holes on both front and rear wheels. Now, my powder coater did mask off these. They plugged the holes and they masked off this. So there shouldn't be any powder in those, but sometimes it could sneak by those things and you never know. So it makes, it's good insurance to grab a tap and die set and clean out those threads. Also going to grab a little bit of sandpaper and just lightly sand out this mounting surface where the bearings go. And we'll make sure that all of those things are clean so that our wheel bearings don't have any problems going in. We don't want any grit, dirt, grime in there at all because then the wheel bearings won't seat properly, which means your wheel won't turn properly, which could cause some premature failures and some other issues that we don't want to deal with. So yeah, I will be using my tap and die set for that. You won't need the tap and die to install your wheel bearings or your seals. Anyway, enough chit chatter from me. Let's mount the camera or use that camera and we'll get going on installing these wheel bearings. All right, guys, so I'm going to start with a little sandpaper. This is nothing spectacular. This is some 1500 grit. I don't know if you can see it there, light 1500 grit wet sandpaper. I'm just going to lightly clean the inside here. Flip it over, do the same thing on the other side. Again, just to make sure that nothing got in there. Here we go. So now I'm going to install the valve stems. So these are some 90-degree Bike Master valve stems. You can probably see them better with this, maybe. The light from out there is pretty harsh and it's screwing up everything. We're going to install these. Now I'm not going to put thread locker on these just yet. I'm just going to make them snug. The reason is that I'm pretty sure that I'm going to make these the dry weather tires, which means that rain is not going on them, and the S1000 has the tire pressure monitor sensors on them, so I'll need to take them off of those wheels and put them on here. All right. So now I'm going to clean up these threads. Now what's important here is that you make sure that your tap is the correct thread pitch and width. You don't want to cross thread anything and, again, create more problems for yourself. All right, so those are all cleaned out. Now the other thing that I'm going to do, not here on screen, is that this mounting surface right here, where the front rotors mount to, there's powder coat on here, and obviously there are different thicknesses. So what I'll do is I'll probably get a sander, and I'll just level or just remove the powder coating right off of the surface here. That way my rotors will mount flush, and I'll do that on both sides, but I'll do that off camera. It doesn't need to be done here. But we just cleaned out the holes. We'll do the same thing on the other side, but to save time, let's go and let's start to install our wheel bearings. So with the front wheel, it doesn't make any difference which side you start with. Both sides are the same, and there's nothing different about the bearings or the seals that we're going to be installing here from left to right. It really does not matter whatsoever. So what we're going to do is we got our seal driver. I pre-selected size here. Let me grab one of the old wheel bearings. And for the driver's side, this is the driver here, you just want to select the size that sits on the outer race of your wheel bearing. So your wheel bearing primarily has three pieces. There's this inner race, this piece in here, the outer race here, and then the bearings that sit in the middle. So they're under this plastic cover that's all corroded and nasty here. So when you are driving in a bearing, you do not want to drive from with anything sitting in here on the bearings, because if you put any pressure on this plastic or rubber piece, that's putting pressure on the bearings, and you'll push the bearings out from the other side, and you'll be ordering a new bearing set shortly after. You also don't want to press a bearing in on the inner race for the same reason. You always want to press bearings into whatever it is they're going in, wheels, hub housing, whatever it is, on the outer race. So when you select a socket or a driver, you just want to make sure that it's on the outer race, that it's sitting on the outer race like that. And you don't want to grab one that's smaller that sits on the inner race or on the rubber part. You want to make sure that it's on the outer race so that when you drive that bearing in, it's driving in flush, straight down, and putting pressure on the outer race. All right? So I predetermined what size I'm going to need. So now what we're going to do, we're going to grab our heat gun, and we're going to heat up this outside edge here, get it nice and warm, and then we're going to grab our wheel bearing, and we're going to tap it into place. As simple as that, really. So how long you should heat this up? I don't know, a few minutes until it's warm. I don't have a predetermined temperature number, and I don't have a thermometer. You just want to get it nice and warm, and then hopefully it's warm enough so that when you go to grab our bearing, the bearing will drop right in. Okay, that's been about 5 minutes. It's warm to the touch. Let's go and quickly grab our wheel bearing. Now your wheel bearings are not directional. It doesn't make any difference which side you have. It doesn't make any difference if they drop in this way, that way, or whatever. So we just want to put this in here, and you can see, well, I don't know if you can see, but it seats in there pretty good. Set this right in the center. Grab our mallet. Make sure we're on the outer race, and tap down. Now what you want, I'll show you on the other way, but there's a shelf in there. We want to make sure that we seat actually my rubber mallet's probably not the best. I got my 1-pounder here. All right, there we go. And you'll know when you're seated once it makes a different sound. You could hear it once the bearing hit that shelf. It makes a different sound. But I'll flip it over and show you. So you can see in there, that little shelf right here, that's the mounting surface, or that's the seating surface where you want the bearing to go. So we want to drive the bearing all the way down there. So you don't want to stop when it's flush, because remember, if you stop when it's flush, then there's no room for the seal, and we still have to put the seal in here. So this bearing is in, it's spinning freely. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes or so, and we're ready for the next wheel bearing. But before that, you want to make sure you install your spacer. Do not forget this wheel spacer. If you do not install this and you go to install your wheel bearing, when you go to remove the wheel bearings, just order another set because they're going to be damaged and you can't reuse them. So don't forget to drop in your wheel spacer. It is unidirectional. Doesn't make any difference which way it goes in. Just drop that in there before you put in your second wheel bearing. There we go. Now we've bottomed it, changed. So now we're in. The other thing is, I'm also on a thick rubber mat here. This thing is about a ½ inch thick. And I'm on top of a terry cloth tile to protect the wheel. Don't do this on concrete or asphalt without maybe some wood blocks or something like that to protect the wheel. Otherwise, your nice wheels, whether they're just back from powder coating like mine, or they're just stock wheels that look really nice and you don't want to damage them. So protect the wheels. All right, so both our bearings are in. They're turning freely, they're fully seated. So now we just need to get our seals warm, and we'll drive the seals in on top of those. What I forgot to mention is, even though these are sealed bearings, you saw that there was cover on both sides of the bearings, which means they're non-serviceable. You don't have to grease them or anything like that. However, water and things could get in here. So what a lot of people like to do, including me, is when you're installing your seals, what we like to do is put a little bead of wheel bearing or high temp grease. So I have some high temp wheel bearing grease here, nothing spectacular. We're just going to put a little in here and then put the bearing down on top of, or the seal down on top of it, not bearing, excuse me. And this is just a protective layer to help keep out moisture. Now here's one of our seals. Now the seals are directional. So there's a flat face, and then there's an open end with a little wire band around it. That goes towards the wheel. This is the outside face. This is inside. Pop that down like that. And again, we'll grab our driver. And seeing it's rubber and we got some lube there, a couple of light taps. Make sure it's seated. We have some that popped out. Take that off. And there we go. We have one side all completely done with seal in place. We'll just flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. So again, open end with the band, side down, flat face on the outside. That right there. Grab our driver. Couple of light taps, seat it. Remove the excess grease. And our front wheel is done. So again, I still need to clean off this surface here Probably this surface here as well, seeing things mount to it. So I need to get the powder coat off of those. I'll take a sander to it afterwards. But let's turn our attention to the rear wheel. All right, so first we're going to be installing our angled valve stem. And again, I'm going to just hand tighten that down there. Okay, so the rear wheel. The process is similar, but not the same. The rear wheel has a snap ring that I showed you, so we need our snap ring pliers. So if we look down in here, into the side of the wheel there, you'll see there's a little groove, a little channel right here where our snap ring goes all the way around. And the other side does not have that. The other side is buttery smooth. So one side has a snap ring, one side does not. Again, it really does not make a difference what side you start with, as long as you make sure that we get the spacer in between, and then we can put on our snap ring. Okay. Now, drop in our spacer, again, non-directional. Oh, look at that, drops right in. That's why you heat it up. Now we grab our snap ring pliers. Drop that right in the groove like so. Now for the rear wheel, there's only one seal, and that goes on the side with the snap ring. That's because the other seal that comes with the bike goes on the outside of the hub. Now I'll remind you that this is the hub side, and the hub protects this. That's why this is relatively flush, and this doesn't mount here. So the hub side's going to go here, and then this seal would go on the outside of the hub along with the other bearing that comes with the hub. So just technically the one seal for the wheel. That goes on the snap ring side. So like the front wheel, we're going to grab some wheel bearing, high temp wheel bearing grease. Set that in there. Grab our driver. Lightly tap this down like so, and then we can remove the excess. Nah, that's how we install our wheel bearings and seals. Now let's grab one of these. We'll head on back over to my desk and we'll start to wrap this up. All right, guys, so we're back over here at my desk, and I wanted to briefly talk to you guys about how to remove the seals and bearings from your stock wheels. We're not going to go ahead and obviously remove them since I just installed them, but I at least wanted to talk to you about how or what the process is and what tools you're going to need or may need and things of that nature. So this is the rear wheel. It's the seal side. Obviously, under this seal is the snap ring. So you're obviously going to need a snap ring removal tool. You'll also need a tool to remove the seal. So this, don't look at the other end. I was using it for something that I wasn't intended and got it all jinky. But you'll put this under the seal like so, and then you'll pry up to remove the seal on whatever wheels. And then you'll need something to remove the bearing. Now I have a blind hole bearing puller set. We'll look at that in a second. Or you can use a flathead screwdriver with a mallet. So this is the blind hole bearing removal set. This is a slide hammer. So if you've ever worked in the body industry, you know what a slide hammer is. Basically, this tool screws onto the end of one of these attachments. It goes into the bearing hole. So this item drops down into the hole. And you can see that those prongs on the end, those would sit on the bottom of the bearing. It would grab the bottom of the bearing. And you would expand those things until it hits or seats on the bearing. You screw it onto the end of here, and then this slide hammer pulls up like this, in this fashion, until the bearing comes out. Now, makes it really easy to remove the bearings. Now, if you don't happen to have one of these, you can use a flathead screwdriver and a mallet, that 1-pound mallet. And basically what people do is they put this in here and they try to find the edge of the bearing, wherever it may be, like that. And then once they find it, they can tap on it with a hammer and they'll go around it like that until the bearing pops out. I don't like doing that because that way you might mar the inside spacer. You might damage the wheel. There are a number of things that you might do to damage that thing. So I like using the blind hole puller. There are like a 3-jaw bearing puller that you could use, and there are a couple of other ones. I happen to like this one. It comes with 4 different attachments, as you can see, depending on the wheel bearing size, or bearing size, not wheel bearing, but depending on the bearing size that you're using. I just mentioned that these connect to the inner race, so that when we take these out, it really doesn't matter. We wouldn't want to drive a bearing into its housing or seating position on the inner race, but seeing we're yanking the bearings out, doesn't make any difference if we hammer on the inner race or outer race. It doesn't make any difference as long as we get the entire bearing and all of the races out. So that's how you would go about removing the bearings. I think we can wrap up, but before we do, I want to show you some before and after pictures with the wheels actually on the bike. So check this out. I'll show you some video here while I'm chatting, but you know how it goes. My name is Derek. This is Euro Superbike Life. Like, comment, share, subscribe, or smash the video if you're into that kind of thing. Until next time, guys, take care.